like a video game death. He died, he came right back.
Find your balance with a special excerpt from the Avatar Brave the Elements podcast.
Featuring our guests, Mike DiMartino and Bryan Konietzko.
I always forget that. Mike's always like, yeah, Aang died in the end of book 2. And I'm always like,
I forget about that too.
I thought he just
We did leave
zapped.
on a bit of a, yeah. Well, I mean, Katara had the healing water, so we know
she did.
Maybe he's going to be okay. Yeah.
Well, I at cons, I see a lot of Aang cosplayers, right? And the ones that are really good, they show me the scar on the back. And I'm like, oh yeah, we did that. I forgot we got him good with that one, huh? I forget about that.
Yeah, I kind of forget about it too. And it was actually when I was rewatching The Awakening for, I don't know, the 4th or 5th time just in the last year or so, when Sokka says, "Welcome back to the land of the living."
Hey, good to see you back with the living, buddy.
Like, I had sort of skimmed past that in my mind, and then for some reason this last watch I watched and I was like, that's so macabre. Like, classic Sokka being like, "Hey, dead guy, how you doing? Welcome back to where we've been while you were dead and unconscious." So I think that's why I wanted to make sure we pointed that out, because like for some reason, it's often Sokka who, you know, in his like tactless way is the character that reminds me of like the grim reality of the situation sometimes in episodes.
Was there any pushback from the studio at the time? We're like, hey, we're going to kill the kid. Huh?
I mean, it's like a video. Yeah. It's like a video game death. I mean, you've got like, you know, like Mike said, Katara had the healing water, so it's like he died, he came right back. You know,
he had extra life. He had an extra life.
He was resuscitated. He had a save. You know.
But it's also one of those things that rewards you with a rewatch, right? Which is true of so much of Avatar, which is that when you're doing a rewatch and you're watching that moment with Zuko and Katara where she's got that water and is sort of, you know, they're sort of looking contemplatively at Zuko's scar, you have the reward of like, thank God he doesn't, you know, it's a good thing he doesn't repair his scar with that healing water.
I know.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the characters that we meet for the first time, or that we get to know a little bit better if we've been Easter egged them, like Lion Turtle. But, you know, or Ozai, for example, where we actually see Ozai for the first time. I think maybe we sort of touched on this in season 2, but what was that conversation like when we just weren't seeing Ozai clearly right in front of us until this moment that happens at the beginning of book 3?
I mean, I think early on we just wanted to have like the intrigue of who is this guy? He was supposed to be the big bad, you know, that we weren't gonna. Aang was never gonna face him in the first 2 books, so we were trying to build that mystery around him and stuff. You know, in retrospect, maybe it would have been interesting to meet him earlier. I don't know. But anyway, this was the moment of like Zuko finally comes home, and we thought, well, that's the place to, you know, finally show him in his full splendor in the throne room. So
you have redeemed yourself, my son. Welcome home.
Yeah, I remember I think the idea came out of the writer's room. Like there was this idea to hide him. And then I think we thought, oh, he's going to look like Zuko unscarred. And we wanted to like save that. And then in the end, it was kind of like, it's animation, so it's hard to make. I don't know. It didn't have the impact we thought it was going to. It was just like, hey, there he is. He's a guy. And he has long hair and a really long like goatee or something. You know, it was okay.
It had the impact on me when I walked into the booth and it was Mark Hamill. It had the heavy impact on me.
Who looks a little different. He's, you know.
Yeah.
It's a little different. I was like, but it was like, Mark's going to play Ozai. I'm like, sure, Mark. Andrea Romano's like, yeah, Mark's going to come play. And then it's Mark Hamill walks in the room and I'm like, huh? That's Mark Hamill. It was crazy. I was like, I kept my cool, of course.
Of course, you're Dante Basco.
But it was a crazy experience. I was like, what is going on right now? And then we're saying like Star Wars lines to each other, like Luke and Vader kind of talk. He's like telling me stuff. I'm like, this is so weird. this is so weird. You're like a Darth Vader dude right now to me. Mark Hamill, you're crazy. It was wild. It had the impact on me.
Yeah, I love that you didn't show his face. And I think I understand what you're saying, because if this were Game of Thrones or whatever, insert, popular show here where we see a character in the shadows and it's live action, that's the moment where you reveal, like, it's been Marlon Brando this whole time. I can't believe you got Orson Welles to play this character. I never knew. So I understand the sort of like stunt casting reveal that you're not getting with the animation. But I think what you just said is actually quite wonderful, because, this is such Zuko's story alongside Aang and the rest of the gang's story, but it's really also Zuko's story in a huge way. And so the idea that we don't get to see his father's face until he does, I think is really powerful. So I think that in and of itself is kind of amazing, because we also know Aang doesn't. So we're along with them for their experience. And so that the impact, I think, just like you were saying, Dante, you feel the impact of it in the character's experience, which is great, because that creates that sort of empathetic response that we have to Zuko. And it's one of the reasons why people feel so much like they're on his journey as much as Aang's, if not more so for some people,
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, that's the end of his banishment. And so it sort of brings you, like you said, it's his first time seeing his dad since he was banished, which has been years by this point. So, I don't think it was like a mistake. I think that our original thought of the impact it would have, it didn't have that impact, but it wasn't necessarily a bad choice. It was just sort of like, okay.
Yeah. But he's also very handsome. Like he's not maniacal.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Yeah, you're like, oh, he's a very attractive young father. Like he's not, guy. He doesn't have this sort of, like wrinkly, always his eyebrows, his brows furrowed,
I was like, how much older is Iroh than Ozai here? What's going on? Uncle Iroh's a little older.
We always say he's about 10 years older, but also Iroh lived through the war.
True.
And I mean, I don't know, all my friends, like we just lived through a pandemic and we all aged quite a bit. And I'm imagining living through the decades of war on the front lines. Like I think that might have aged Iroh quite a bit. So
yeah, and it wouldn't surprise me if Ozai had some sort of weird, like hyperbolic chamber or something that he goes into.
He has a skincare routine. Yeah. He's got a skincare routine, and a lot of you have been asking about it, and he would love to.
The new Fire Nation line coming out, and it's fire. It's hot.
That's right. That's right. In terms of stylistically what you were looking at, we talked together at the beginning of book 2 when we were getting ready to dive into that. We talked about the trip that the two of you took and how much that informed, the Forbidden City and when we were getting to know Ba Sing Se and the design of that. And we really talked about that, not just with you, but with other people on the show through our last season. And then here we have this exposure to the Fire Nation and the sort of central point that's inside this volcano, right? This volcano bed. And Bryan, you took a trip before season 3 too that kind of inspired some of that, right?
Yeah, for book 2, Mike and I had the chance to go to Beijing, which was awesome. And, it was a whirlwind trip, but we got to see a lot of cool architecture and take our own photo reference and buy some reference books. And so I was taking a vacation to Iceland for the first time in summer 2006. But my idea of a vacation is generally to like go on some adventure, and I love doing like landscape photography. So I was just taking a bunch of photos, and all those ended up being like feeding directly into what we ended up making the Fire Nation look like. Because Iceland, obviously it's very far north, which is different than our kind of equatorial archipelago of the Fire Nation. But at the end of the day, it's a young piece of geology. It's this volcanic island, and if you've ever been there, it strikes you at least around the coast, like it really looks, a lot of it kind of looks like Hawaii. It's very green, and there are these waterfalls everywhere. And then in the interior of the country, which are sometimes called the Highlands or whatever. It's like volcanic. They're not technically deserts, I don't think, but they look like deserts and like black sand, like expanses.
This is Iceland?
The wastelands are, and there's basalt rock formations, and then this really verdant green, like moss, and again, just waterfalls everywhere. So it was super inspiring. It's a very intense, dramatic landscape, and that seemed good for the Fire Nation. It's a very like, again, it's a very young piece of like geology, so it's kind of violent. You look and you're like, oh, this is where the earth ripped open and a bunch of magma poured out, and then it cooled off when it hit some water and it formed basalt, and then you really see, because it is so young, like how it formed. I mean, you feel like you're in like the Land Before Time or whatever. It feels very primordial. So that all felt really appropriate for the Fire Nation. And, we put like specific locations in, that were real. Like there's this volcanic crater vent thing called, I think it's called Viti, and it smells terrible, but everybody hikes down and swims in the water, which is supposed to be good for your skin. But
warm water?
It was not as warm as advertised for a volcanic vent. I remember being
not
quite
a hot
cold.
spring.
And I had to throw out my bathing suit because it just smelled like sulfur so bad. Like I could not get it out. But that was where Combustion Man attacked Team Avatar, their camp. It was just like you're on another planet. It's just a wild looking place. So I was like, oh, we'll just use this crater. And so yeah, Iceland.
This is Iceland. Dumb question. Is there ice?
Yeah, there are glaciers. There's a lot.
Okay, cool.
There are glaciers.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
Fair question.
People might want to know. I want to know.
But like that place is so wild that they have mountains. There's this thing, I forget the Icelandic name, but they call it the Queen Mountain, I think. And it's like there was this huge thick glacier, and on top of just a big flat plain of like volcanic rock, I think. And then this volcano erupts under the glacier, blows this huge hole in this really deep glacier, fills up with lava, and then the glacier moves away, like goes away. And then, so it's like a cake mold mountain. And so it's just crazy. Sitting in the middle of this desert, and then the sides are soft. They end up kind of just like crumbling into slopes. And it's when you're driving in the wastelands, there's just like nothing. And then all of a sudden there's just this mountain just sitting there, and it's like a cake mold. So there's a bunch of, this is why geologists like love Iceland. There's just a bunch of like really wild formations and stuff there. So
it's true that when you are a person who engages with the Avatarverse on a regular basis, you start to notice stuff like that in a different context. Like Dante and I did a con in Colorado, and we went to Garden of the Gods, and it's that the first thought I had, like I filter everything through Avatar now, for better or for worse. Like the first thought I had was like, it really looks like some earthbenders were up to like some shenanigans around here. Like you really see it through the lens of how are we as humans engaging with this landscape, and how are we having conversations with it, and how are we forming it and creating it. And again, like, there's ways to do that are much more about like what bending would be if we were having those impacts. And then the things we don't think about are the ways in which we're impacting it less directly and possibly for the worse. So I think the Avatarverse also kind of keeps you checking in with that stuff, ideally. And hopefully we have nothing but fans who are concerned with keeping the world going and protecting it, and, trying to back out of some of the damage that we've done. But I don't want to go super negative, but that is something that crosses my mind. Bend your ear for ad-free episodes with Avatar Braving the Elements Premium.
Subscribe today on Apple Podcasts.